Welcome to District Deep Dive, where I, a walking encyclopedia of Hunger Games knowledge, deep dive the entire Hunger Games series. Today, I'm going to be covering chapters 15 through 18 in the Hunger Games. Before I begin, don't forget to turn on notifications so you get notified every time I post a new episode and possibly a bonus episode or two. And while you're there, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe and share this with fellow Hunger Games fans because it really does help with the algorithm. Lastly, this series contains spoilers for Sunrise on the Reaping, so if you want a spoiler-free version of this series, let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, you have been warned. To start out, I'm going to summarize the chapters we'll be covering. Chapter 15. After suffering from Tracker-Jacker-induced nightmares for the last 2 days, Katniss slowly wakes up, wondering how much time has passed, how many have died, and if Peeta is among them. She turns her focus to the bow and arrows now in her possession. Having a bow gives her a new outlook on her odds in the arena. Taking stock of her injuries and the fact that she is as skinny as she was after her father's death, she gets up to collect water and hunt. After cleaning up in a stream, she starts to put her game on the fire when she hears a twig snap. Reflexively drawing her bow, she sees the person who has been shadowing her, Rue. Smiling and lowering her bow, Katniss tells her that the careers aren't the only ones that can form alliances, and offers Rue some of her food. In response, Rue offers to fix Katniss's Tracker-Jacker stings. From working in the orchards in District 11, Rue knows of and carries around leaves to help with the stings. After gratefully receiving the treatment from Rue, Katniss gives her some of her own bird medicine to help with her arm. Rue asks Katniss if she was serious about wanting her as an ally, to which Katniss responds that she is, despite knowing Haymitch is probably groaning at this team up. She knows Rue is a survivor and trusts her, and she reminds her of Prim. As they share a Grusling, Rue tells Katniss about life in District 11, which makes Katniss appreciate her own district more. The two pick a tree and share Katniss' sleeping bag for the night. As the anthem plays, hiding her lips behind her hand, Katniss asks Rue how many nights she missed. Rue informs her that she missed 2, and the girls from District 1 and 4 are dead. Katniss then asks her about Peeta and tells her that she doesn't know if he really saved her life or not, because she was hallucinating from Tracker-Jackers when it happened. Rue informs her that she knows Peeta is no longer with the careers because she's been to spy on their camp, and maybe he really did save her and had to run. Katniss then says, well, if he did, it was probably all part of his act that he's in love with her. Rue responds that she didn't think it was an act. Katniss tells her, of course it is, and he worked it out with our mentor. As the anthem ends, showing no deaths for the day, the two try out Katniss's night vision glasses. Rue tells Katniss more about what she's observed about the career supplies. This gives Katniss an idea. The careers are not hungry, and she and Rue are going to have to fix that. Chapter 16. As the two girls fall asleep, Katniss realizes how lonely she's been in the arena, and being with Rue offers her a bit of security. The boom of a cannon wakes Katniss up the next morning, with no way of knowing who it was until the death recap. Katniss worries it may be Peeta. As the two girls eat breakfast and attempt to hunt, Katniss gets all the information about the careers base from Rue as she can, and she starts to try to formulate a plan to destroy their food supplies. As they gather some roots and berries, Rue tells Katniss more about her life, how she loves music, and Katniss's Mockingjay pin is the reason she decided to trust her. They have mockingjays at home that she likes to sing to, and they carry messages for her in the orchards. When Katniss tries to give her the pin, saying it has more meaning to Rue than it does to her, Rue declines, saying she likes seeing it on her, and she has a token of her own. Later, after formulating a plan of attack, they set up 2 of the 3 campfires Rue is going to light to distract the careers as Katniss finds a way to destroy their supplies. Before they split off, Rue teaches Katniss her Mockingjay signal to say that she's okay but she can't get back right away. Then, Rue throws her arms around Katniss and tells her to be careful. As Katniss makes her way to the careers camp, she wonders again if Peeta really did save her or not. Gathering her courage, she closes in on Rue's hiding spot to watch. As Katniss observes the pyramid of supplies and recognizing it's probably booby-trapped in some way, she tries to figure out exactly how. The remaining careers and the boy from District 3 head off in the direction of the first fire Rue has set. As Katniss is still trying to formulate a plan to destroy the pile, she sees Foxface emerge from her right. She watches as Foxface makes her way to the supplies, carefully watching her steps, hopping, and then squealing when she accidentally falls to the ground at one point. Foxface takes a small handful of items from the supplies, then repeats her dance back and runs back into the woods. This appearance from Foxface makes Katniss realize that the space surrounding the pyramid is mined from the explosives and the platforms from the start of the games. Katniss notices a burlap bag of apples in the pile. She decides to shoot a tear into the bag of apples to cause them to fall and set off all the bombs at once. She allows herself 3 arrows to get the job done. The first one tears the side, the second one widens the tear, and the third one rips the torn flap. The apples begin to spill to the ground, and Katniss is blown backwards into the air. Chapter 17. Katniss has the breath knocked out of her as she hits the ground. She shields her face as the explosions and supplies continue raining down for about a minute. When they finally stop, she allows herself a moment of satisfaction at destroying the career supplies, before she attempts to make it to the cover of the trees. However, the effects of the blast have left her extremely dizzy and unable to walk or hear anything. Frightened, but knowing she cannot let her fear show, as she is absolutely live on every TV screen in Penham. She pulls her hoodie up and pulls the cord to prevent a blood trail from her bleeding left ear. She crawls back to Rue's hidden copse of trees just in time, as the careers come barreling into the clearing. Cato is so enraged that he is pulling his hair and beating his fist to the ground. Cato then turns his anger on the boy from District 3, putting him in a headlock and snapping his neck. As night falls and the death recap is shown, Katniss sees that the boy from District 10 was the one who died that morning. The death recap also shows the careers that the person who blew up their supplies is not dead as they originally thought. So they set off into the night to hunt. Knowing she's as safe as she can be here at the crime scene, Katniss hunkers down for the night. Freezing as she left her sleeping bag with Rue, she digs out a hollow under the bushes and tries to keep warm. She wakens the next morning to the sound of Foxface's laughter. Hearing has returned in her right ear, but her left ear remains deaf. She watches as Foxface manages to find a few items in the ruined supplies before being startled by something and runs back into the woods. Katniss then starts to make her way back to her and Rue's meeting site, shooting a couple fish in the stream as she goes. After waiting for Rue in a tree until mid-afternoon, Katniss decides to go look for her. When she finds the third fire Rue was supposed to set, arranged but unlit, she knows something is wrong. Katniss begins to hunt for whatever is keeping Rue up in a tree when she hears the Mockingjay singing Rue's 4-note tone. Katniss then sings back to them, letting Rue know it's safe to join her. That's when she hears her scream. She takes off running to the sound of Rue screaming and yelling her name. Katniss yells back, hoping to draw the careers away from Rue and to her instead. She enters the clearing just in time to see Rue tangled up in a net, reaching for her, and the spear entering her small body. Chapter 18. Quote, the boy from District 1 dies before he could pull out the spear, Katniss's arrow driving deeply in the center of his neck. Katniss immediately reloads and has to be told by Rue multiple times that there are no more of them. Katniss shoves Marvel's body away from Rue as she frees her from the net, but she knows the wound from the spear is beyond her capabilities to heal. As she sits crouched next to her, Rue asks if Katniss blew up the food, Katniss assuring her that she did. Rue then tells Katniss that she has to win, and Katniss promises to do so for the both of them. As she pulls Rue's head into her lap, clutching her hand, Rue asks her to sing. Throat tight with tears, Katniss sings an old, soothing lullaby, one that promises a more hopeful tomorrow. When she finishes the song, the Mockingjays pick up the tune, then a moment later, Rue's cannon fires. As Katniss gently lays Rue's head on the ground and stands up, she can't stop looking at Rue. She can't bring herself to leave her like this. Gale's ranting in the woods against the Capitol comes to Katniss's mind, no longer seeming pointless. But what can she do? There's no way to take revenge on the Capitol for doing this. That's when Peeta's words on the rooftop the night before the games finally make sense to Katniss. Rue was more than just a piece in their games. Gathering up some wildflowers a few steps away, Katniss begins to decorate Rue's body with the flowers. She weaves them in her hair, wreathes her face, and covers the wound that ended her life, knowing the Capitol will have to show it when they collect her body, even if they turn the cameras away for now. As she steps back and takes one last look at Rue, Katniss presses the middle 3 fingers of her left hand and extends it out to Rue. Telling her goodbye, Katniss turns around and walks away without looking back. Hearing the birds fall silent, signaling the approach of the hovercraft to retrieve her body, Katniss pauses, but focuses on what's happening in front of her, not behind. When the bird song begins again, signaling Rue is gone, a young Mockingjay lands on a branch in front of Katniss, belting out Rue's 4-note song, the one that says she's safe. Katniss wanders around until sunset, lost in numbness, grief, and rage. Before she can climb into a tree for the night, a sponsor gift arrives. It's bread from District 11. Realizing this must have been meant for Rue, but now that she's gone, the people of District 11 must have authorized Haymitch to send it to her instead. Knowing what it must have cost them, Katniss thanks the people of District 11. As she makes her bed for the night, she watches as the death recap shows Marvel and Rue's faces before falling asleep. She dreams a happy dream of Rue teaching her to talk to the Mockingjays, which leaves her feeling even lonelier the next morning. After several hours of sitting motionless, the thought of Prim watching her breaks her out of her stupor. Over the course of the day, she consolidates her supplies, hunts, and then cooks the grooseling she shot, hoping the fire will draw in the careers for her to kill. But no one shows. She climbs a tree and settles in for the night, replaying the events of the day before, replaying her first kill. When the recap shows no new deaths, Katniss is about to go to sleep, when trumpets sound, signaling an announcement. Claudius Templesmith tells the contestants that there has been a rule change. Now, 2 tributes are allowed to win if they both originate from the same district. As it sinks in that both her and Peeta can win, without thinking, Katniss calls out Peeta's name. Now onto some world-building topics in the Hunger Games universe. I've kind of already touched on these last episode with the start of the games, but the pedestals or the circular plates that the tributes enter the arena on, and then the landmines. The landmines are underneath the metal plate that the tributes rise into the arena on to prevent them from getting off early, but they're disabled after the 60-second countdown. But when they're activated, even just a little bit of pressure causes them to explode. District 11 grows the crops and the food for the country of Panem and is the agriculture district. It's a very large district and it has, quote, huge open fields with herds of dairy cattle grazing in them. Surrounding the district is a fence at least 35 feet tall that's topped with wicked coils of barbed wire, and the base of that fence is lined with huge metal plates that make it impossible for you to get underneath it. District 11 is very different from District 12 when it comes to security. They have evenly placed watchtowers with armed guards in the fields of wildflowers. There are small communities of shacks that Katniss says makes the homes in the seam look upscale in comparison. With it being such a large district, they have a very large population as well. And Katniss even thinks, quote, those kids we see on the camera waiting for the reaping each year, they can't be but a sampling of the ones who actually live here. What do? Have preliminary drawings, pick the winners ahead of time, and make sure they're in the crowd? Their Justice Building is a huge marble structure that's located in the square, and Katniss says, once it must have been a thing of beauty, but time has taken its toll. Even on television, you can see ivy overtaking the crumbling facade, the sag of the roof. The square itself is ringed with run-down storefronts. Most of them are abandoned. Wherever the well-to-do live in District 11, it's not here. There's also a veranda that's connected to the Justice Building, the tilted expanse between the front doors and the stairs that's shaded by a roof supported by columns. But I will cover more of the details of like the inside of the Justice Building when we get into Catching Fire. The crop fields stretch as far as the eye can see, and it has men, women, and children workers who wear straw hats. And there are also orchards, which is where Rue worked. The workers in the orchards carry around leaves to help with trackerjacker stings because there are a lot of trackerjacker nests. District 11 has some berries that Katniss doesn't recognize, but she says that they're as good as District 12's blackberries. They also have a lot of mockingjays in District 11. Another bird they have there is called a grousling. And Rue says that sometimes a flock will wander over into the orchard and they will get a decent lunch for that day. The workers are not allowed to eat any of the crops they grow. And if you do, Rue says they will whip you and make everyone else watch. The mayor's very strict about it. And it seems to be a very common occurrence. During harvest, everyone is required to work, even the school children who don't attend school during this time. And the workers who are severely underfed are fed a bit more during this time because that way they can keep working longer. And some of the workers in the orchards are also provided with night vision glasses at times. Rue says that sometimes when we harvest through the night, they'll pass out a few pairs of those to us highest in the trees, where the torchlights don't reach. One time, this boy Martin, he tried to keep his pair, hid it in his pants. They killed him on the spot. Rue also mentions that they sing a lot at home and at work. The grousling that I just mentioned, Katniss says that she thinks it's some form of wild turkey, and that, quote, once the feathers are plucked, it's no bigger than a chicken, but it's plump and firm. So fatty, the grease drips down your face when you bite into it. Next, I'm going to cover what happens when only 8 tributes remain in the Hunger Games. Every Hunger Games, when it gets down to the final 8, each of the remaining tributes gets a special feature on them. And this feature includes interviewing that tribute's friends and family. This is where the lie that Gale is Katniss's cousin starts. Betting also ramps up during the final 8, and throughout the games, along with other statistics, every tribute has a list of kills that helps people place their bets. At the end of this set of chapters, Katniss will have received credit for killing 3 tributes: Glimmer, the girl from 4, and Marvel. I've already covered what the 74th arena looks like in last episode, but I'm going to add on to it a little bit more here. There is a marshy area where Katniss and Rue sleep in that tree that has a type of water bird that neither of them recognize, but they eat large eggs from. The careers camp is set up near the lake, and they have their supplies stashed about 30 yards away from them. There's a copse of trees at the edge of the woods that Rue uses to spy on the careers camp. The bushy foliage blocks Rue and then later Katniss from their view. The cornucopia still sits in its original position from the start of the games, but now it's been picked clean. So the careers have their supplies stacked in a big pyramid, and this is what Katniss says. Most of the supplies held in crates, burlap sacks, and plastic bins are piled neatly in a pyramid in what seems to be a questionable distance from the camp. Others are sprinkled around the perimeter of the pyramid, almost mimicking the layout of supplies around the cornucopia at the onset of the games. A canopy of netting that, aside from discouraging birds, seems to be useless shelters to the pyramid itself. For characters this episode, I'm only going to briefly cover 2 because I've already covered all the other players so far. We learn about Martin. He is a boy from District 11 that was killed by peacekeepers after he takes the night vision glasses. Rue says that, quote, everyone knows he was no danger. Martin wasn't right in the head. I mean, he still acted like a 3-year-old. He just wanted the glasses to play with. And then I already mentioned her when I talked about Greasy Say, but this is when Katniss mentions Greasy Say's granddaughter. She says, there's a little girl, one of Greasy Say's grandkids, who wanders around the hob. She's not quite right, but she's treated as some sort of pet. People toss her scraps and things. And then in Mockingjay, when Say is coming to cook for Katniss, her granddaughter also comes with her. She says, her little granddaughter, the one that lives in her own world, takes a bright blue ball of yarn from my mother's knitting basket. Greasy Say tells her to put it back, but I say she can have it. I think that is the quickest amount of time I've spent on world building since I started the series. So now we can officially get into the foreshadowing, the parallels, symbolism, and everything like that in this set of chapters. I'm going to, of course, start out talking about Katniss. Music was a part of her life before her father's death, but afterwards she kind of changed her mindset to a more utilitarian way of thinking because she became responsible for keeping herself and her family alive at 11, turned into a way of thinking that if it doesn't help me survive, then I'm not going to put any time or effort into it. And if something doesn't help with survival, she doesn't rank it as useful. I say that because when Rue tells Katniss that, what she loves most in the world is music, Katniss says, music, I say. In our world, I rank music somewhere between hair ribbons and rainbows in terms of usefulness. At least a rainbow gives you a tip about the weather. So she has this utilitarian way of thinking that it has to serve a purpose for survival, otherwise I'm not going to focus on it. But she will later learn the use for music and other quote-unquote frivolous things that she thinks of and how they can be used for survival and change. Katniss does not notice the Mockingjays in the arena until Rue points it out, which is just ironic. Rue says, "Haven't you noticed them? They've got nests everywhere," she says. I have to admit, I haven't noticed, which is, like I said, ironic. And after what she thinks is a betrayal from Peeta, she has a hard time believing that he actually would have saved her. And she still doesn't understand that even if he did actually save her, she doesn't understand his motivation. She says, "But I'm still in the dark on what motivated him to betray the careers." Katniss, his motivation was saving you. To add to the list of Katniss's habit of biting her nails or chewing her lips, this set of chapters, when she's hiding from the careers after the explosion, she is terrified and she's not able to defend herself. When she's watching Cato just have his rage and tantrum, she begins to gnaw off what remains of her nail polish to stop her teeth from chattering. Also, to build on last episode, Katniss's survival and hunting skills. Even though she was just injured from this explosion, she still thinks about and knows to hide the blood pouring from her ear to not leave a blood trail. Her not being able to hear really terrifies her, and she thinks that, as a hunter, she relies as much on her ears as she does her eyes, and sometimes more on her ears. That night, when her left ear is still deaf and her right ear is now ringing, she digs out her night vision glasses, and she says that it relaxes me a little to have at least one of my hunter senses working. I drink some water and wash the blood from my ear. Fearing the smell of meat will draw unwanted predators. Fresh blood is bad enough. So again, it's just like her hunter and survival instincts and skills. Katniss says that she's never seen a tribute in the games dig up the mines from the platforms and then reactivate them like the boy from District 3 did, and that it probably came as a shock to the game makers. She says, "Well, hooray for the boy from District 3 for putting one over on them, but what am I supposed to do now?" This is just planting the seed for what Katniss will do to shock the game makers at the end of the games by pulling out the berries. Still building on previous segments, Katniss knowing her strength. She's getting more and more confident and aware of her abilities and not discrediting herself as much. In this set of chapters, she acknowledges her skill with the bow. She says when she's at the pyramid, she thinks, "I'm a good enough shot to get it through those openings in the net." And then she also says that her arm's pretty good when she's debating throwing something at the career supplies to set off the explosions. And I already talked about this in episode 1, but I wanted to add on to it here. During the goodbyes after the reaping, Katniss thinks that she's going to be one of the ones that are going to be weeded out at the beginning before, the real fun begins. By now in the story, though, she no longer thinks that. And like I mentioned in episode 1, before her and Peeta go to confront Cato for the final showdown, she thinks that it was always going to come down to her and Cato. And a precursor to that is after she blows up the supplies. She says, although from what Cato said, Peeta's on his way out. Not that Cato is the final word on anything. Didn't he lose his entire stash of supplies? Let the 74th Hunger Games begin, Cato, I think. Let them begin for real. And then after Rue's death, Katniss lights a fire and she's wondering why the careers aren't showing up. And she thinks maybe it's because they're scared of me. Katniss officially kills someone for the first time here. I mean, she does indirectly kill Glimmer and the girl from District 4, but this is the first time that she shoots someone. And we start to see, leading up to that, her really getting into the mindset of being okay with killing. And I don't want to say okay, but knowing that it's necessary and recognizing that she's going to do it. After the Tracker Jacker attack and she has her bow and arrows now, finally, she thinks, if Cato broke through the trees right now, I wouldn't flee. I'd shoot. I find I'm actually anticipating the moment with pleasure. because Kato is kind of enemy number one in the games, not in the whole story. She's actually becoming more okay with the thought, and now she's anticipating the moment she gets to finally kill Kato. And then we get another little moment of this when her and Rue are in the tree, and she puts her night vision glasses on. She says, "I can see everything from the leaves on the tree to a skunk strolling through the bushes a good 50 feet away. I could kill it here if I had the mind to. I could kill anyone." When Katniss sees Foxface collecting some of the ruined supplies from the career stockpile, there's something about that sly grin that makes me think that befriending Foxface would ultimately get me a knife in the back. With that in mind, this might be an excellent time to shoot her. In the last episode, I said that I think Katniss was being more hyperbolic about wanting to kill the girl from District 8, but we slowly start to see her build up to having to shoot someone. I mean, we'll never really know if Katniss was being 100% genuine when she was thinking about, oh, this is a good time to shoot Foxface, but I think it's starting to be less hyperbolic at this point and more genuine. She is definitely ready to kill the careers, especially Kato. In her state of numbness and grief after Rue's death, when she says that, oh, I'd be an easy target right now, she thinks, except I'd kill anyone I met on sight, without emotion or the slightest tremor in my hands. She says that she hates her competitors, especially the careers, and in this moment, that grief that she's feeling is manifesting as hatred for everyone. And like I've talked about before, anger is a safer emotion for Katniss. She says, "My hatred for the Capitol has not lessened my hatred for my competitors in the least, especially the careers. They, at least, can be made to pay for Rue's death." When she lights the fire, cooking her birds and waiting for someone to show up, she wants them to show up just so she can shoot them. And when the trumpets sound before Claudius makes the announcement, she thinks originally that he's going to announce a feast like they've had in previous Hunger Games, and that she wouldn't go for food, but that may be a prime way to take out a couple of her competitors. So she's already starting to think more on the offensive instead of the defensive. Because she has a bow and arrows now, she can act offensively, just like her blowing up the supplies for the careers. She says, "And for the first time, I have a plan that isn't motivated by the need for flight and evasion, an offensive plan." I'm going to touch on Katniss's eventual PTSD from the games and the nightmares. After the blast leaves her deaf in her left ear for the remainder of the games, she continues to try to test it to see if it'll, any hearing will come back. In Catching Fire, even though the Capitol has fixed her hearing, she still continues to test it sometimes. And she doesn't like the earmuffs that Cinna gives her because it makes it harder to hear and it reminds her of not being able to hear in the arena. She also fake tests her ear in Catching Fire in the arena to kind of show the fact that, oh, I can hear the force field, when she's just lying and putting on a show, because she can actually see part of the force field and she doesn't want to tip off the game makers that she can. This is going to be a depressing episode. Not that any of them are particularly uplifting, but Rue's death is just devastating. And of course we get some devastating parallels with Rue and Prim. There's a parallel between Katniss running to Rue in the 74th arena after she hears her scream, and then to Katniss running to what she thinks is Prim in Catching Fire when the Jabberjays are mimicking Prim's screams. Both times she runs, she doesn't care about the danger. She knows there's probably danger, but she's just trying to get to Rue and to get to Prim. There's some more foreshadowing for Prim's death. Katniss mentions that in District 3, they have factories where they make televisions and automobiles and explosives. Beatty, who is from District 3, is the one that helps Gale design the delayed double explosion that kills so many people, including Prim. After Katniss blows up the career supplies, there's a couple delayed explosions that happen, and in that moment, Katniss is reminded of when her and Prim pop corn at home. And of course, the second delayed explosion is what kills Prim and Mockingjay. We also get some parallels and foreshadowing with how Katniss reacts after Prim's death, and a mirror on how Katniss and her mother both react to grief. Katniss says after Rue's death, "Heaviness infuses my whole body, as if there's liquid lead in my veins. I've lost the will to do the simplest task, to do anything but lie here, staring unblinkingly through the canopy of leaves. For several hours, I remain motionless." This is just an echo of the state that Katniss will be left in after Prim's death and Mockingjay. And it parallels, like I said, with Astrid's reaction after Burdock's death. I will cover more on Katniss and Astrid's reaction to grief in Mockingjay. Back to some previous Katniss segments. Katniss and owing people. She does not like owing people. She says that if Peeta did save her in the arena after the Tracker Jackers, that I'm in his debt again, and this can't be paid back. And when the people of District 11 send Katniss the bread that was meant for Rue, she wonders if this was just a thank you, or if it's because, like me, they don't like to let debts go unpaid. I'm going to be focusing more on Katniss and Rue, obviously, in this set of chapters, but there is a couple moments of Katniss caring about Peeta and Peeta in general that I want to bring up. When the sound of a cannon wakes her up, she's worried that it's Peeta. She continues to worry about him and question if he really did save her in this set of chapters. I have to be cautious as I move along the water, though, because I find my thoughts preoccupied with unanswered questions, most of which concern Peeta. The cannon that fired early this morning, did that signify his death? If so, how did he die? At the hands of a career? And was that in revenge for letting me live? And of course, when it's announced that 2 tributes from the same district can win, she immediately yells out Peeta's name. When Katniss is trying to figure out if Peeta really did save her from the Tracker Jackers, she says that her instincts tell her that he did. And back on my unhinged orange backpack parallel between Peeta and Katniss. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you have to go back to episode 3. Because when I'm reading this is what it's making me think of. So I'm going to put it in here because I am unhinged about this series. When Katniss recovers her backpack with mud because it's bright orange, she says, "It seems bent on reverting to orange no matter how many times I cover it." You mean like how many times you keep reverting to caring about Peeta even though you keep wanting to cover those emotions up? On a less unhinged note, Katniss says that when things are particularly bad, her brain will give her good dreams instead of nightmares. During this set of chapters, she says, "A visit with my father in the woods, an hour of sunlight and cake with Prim. Tonight, it sends me Rue." In Catching Fire, there will be a moment similar to this, and it's about Peeta. This is after their moment on the beach. She says, "When I wake, I have a brief, delicious feeling of happiness that is somehow connected with Peeta. Happiness, of course, is a complete absurdity at this point, since at the rate things are going, I'll be dead in a day, and that's the best case scenario, if I'm able to eliminate the rest of the field, including myself, and get Peeta crowned as the winner of the Quarter Quell. Still, the sensation's so unexpected and sweet, I cling to it, even if only for a few moments, before the gritty sand, the hot sun, and my itching skin demand a return to reality." And that parallels how she wakes up after the dream about Rue. She says, "When I fully awaken, I'm momentarily comforted. I try to hold on to the peaceful feeling of the dream, but it quickly slips away, leaving me sadder and lonelier than ever." While Katniss is a loner, she does still crave human interaction and comfort. There's a moment with Rue that foreshadows Katniss's moments with Peeta in the cave. "I realized for the first time how lonely I've been in the arena, how comforting the presence of another human being can be." And Katniss, thinking that Peeta's declaration is an act, Katniss tells Rue that, "Oh yeah, it's an act that he loves me," and that his confession was just the strategy that he worked out with Haymitch. It was a strategy, but it's not a lie that he's a crush on Katniss, which, of course, Katniss doesn't realize. After Rue's death, after she covers her in flowers, she says, "I find myself wishing I could tell Peeta about the flowers I put on Rue, that I now understand what he was trying to say on the roof. Perhaps if he wins the games, he'll see me on Victor's night." There's a parallel between Katniss burying Rue in the flowers and then Peeta painting that moment during his session with the Game Makers in the Quarter Quell. Katniss says, "I want to do something right here, right now, to shame them, to make them accountable." And Peeta explains on why he painted Rue in the flowers in Catching Fire. He says, "I'm not sure. I just wanted to hold them accountable, if only for a moment," says Peeta, "for killing that little girl." Now we're on to Katniss and Rue. Katniss knows that there's some leaves that help with Tracker Jacker stings that her mother uses, but she can't think of what they look like or what they're called. But Rue will know these leaves and help her with that in just a little bit. Katniss and Rue's disadvantages in life actually are advantages to them in the arena. Since they both come from very food-scarce districts and families, they've had to learn how to survive off the land and learn how to be hungry, unlike their careers. And then I just want to point out this. Katniss says, "I scatter a few mint leaves around our old campfire. Since we gather them some distance away, Rue will understand I've been here, while they'll mean nothing to the careers. Because the careers know nothing about living off the land like Rue and Katniss do. And this is a way for them to silently communicate." I just want to bring up that Rue decided to trust Katniss because of Katniss's Mockingjay pen. And Rue is the one that gets Katniss to notice things, especially Mockingjays. It's just symbolic that Rue is getting Katniss to realize stuff in the arena, like recognize and notice things in the arena on a literal sense, like, oh, there's Mockingjays here. And Rue's death makes Katniss realize what Peeta meant, and it starts her standing up to the Capitol. Katniss and Rue both care about each other. They're both older sisters, and Rue reminds Katniss of Prim, of course, when they're about to split up to destroy the career supplies. Rue throws her arms around me. I only hesitate a moment before I hug her back. Katniss is also protective of Rue. When she's waiting for Rue to show up and she doesn't, she says, "Something is keeping her up a tree. I think I'll go hunt it down." Rue asks Katniss to sing to her as she dies, and that's her last request. And she had just told Katniss earlier that music is what she loves most in the world. While Rue does remind Katniss of Prim, Rue and Prim also have their differences. Like when Katniss is telling Rue about her plan to destroy the career supplies, she says, "You can see the glint of excitement in her eyes. In this way, she's exactly opposite of Prim, for whom adventures are an ordeal. She also just treats Rue like she would Prim in the arena, like her little sister. I turn and head back to the stream, feeling somehow worried. About Rue being killed, about Rue not being killed, and the two of us being left for last. About leaving Rue alone, about leaving Prim alone back home. No, Prim has my mother and Gale, and a baker who has promised she won't go hungry. Rue only has me. And Katniss promising both Rue and Prim that she's going to win. Katniss says that her vow to Rue seems even more important than her promise to Prim. And then as Rue's dying and she asks Katniss to sing, Katniss thinks in her inner monologue, but if this is Rue's last request, I have to at least try. My heart. That sentence is foreshadowing Prim's actual death in Mockingjay. There's also some foreshadowing to the moment after Rue's death in this set of chapters. When Rue teaches Katniss her Mockingjay tune, she says, "It might not work, but if you hear the Mockingjay singing it, you'll know I'm okay, only I can't get back right away." After Rue's body is removed and the young Mockingjay lands on the branch in front of Katniss, it sings Rue's melody, because Katniss says it's probably too young to have picked up more complicated things, but it could pick up Rue's 4-note tone. She says, "Good and safe, I say as I pass under its branch. You don't have to worry about her now. Good and safe." And I think, of course, that young little Mockingjay is meant to represent Rue, and that makes me want to cry. Rue loves Mockingjay. She loves singing to them. She has a few that are, her special friends at home. And she declines to take the Mockingjay pin from Katniss because she likes seeing Katniss wear it. She likes seeing it on her, which is just laying the groundwork for Katniss becoming the Mockingjay. Rue says this about Mockingjays: "They can be dangerous, though, if you get too near their nest, but you can't blame them for that." There's just a lot of stuff throughout the series, especially I want to point out one in Catching Fire, that can be for literal Mockingjays, or it can be for Katniss the Mockingjay. I want to touch on a couple things of Katniss thinking of Prim. The thought of Prim watching her is what pushes Katniss forward a lot of the times in the games, that gives her the strength to keep fighting. After the explosion and she's trying to crawl back into the trees to cover herself and hide from Cato and the careers, it's the thought of Prim having to watch Cato slowly kill her that keeps her going. She doesn't want to make Prim watch her suffer. And there was a moment of this when Katniss was desperate for water. She was trying to look as least desperate as she could for Prim's sake. And it's the thought of Prim watching her that pulls Katniss out of her semi-catatonic state after Rue's death. I also want to talk about Katniss and Haymitch's parallels. How Katniss reacts to Rue's death in the arena mirrors how Haymitch reacts to Maisley's death in the arena. Haymitch thought of Maisley as a sister, and Rue reminds Katniss of her sister, and she kind of sees her as a sister. After their deaths, Haymitch and Katniss are both just at a loss. And I want to compare these two quotes. Katniss says, "My feet wander this way and that until sunset. I'm not afraid, not even watchful, which makes me an easy target, except I kill anyone I met on sight, without emotion or a slight tremor in my hands." And then Haymitch says, "If something attacked me right now, I'd let it take me. I know, I just made a deathbed promise to Maisley to carry on the fight, but I can't seem to rally." They both kind of made similar promises to the person they just lost, but Katniss goes into a more, I'm going to kill anyone that shows up, and Haymitch goes into more of a, I can't keep fighting kind of thing, which I will talk a lot more about this stuff in Sunrise on the Reaping. Haymitch sends Katniss the bread from District 11 after Rue's death, and Mag sends Haymitch strawberry ice cream and coffee after Maisley's death, which black coffee was Maisley's drink of choice, and the strawberry ice cream was kind of a callback to a moment with Maisley before the games. Haymitch takes the supplies from Maisley's backpack and condenses all of it into his supplies, and Katniss takes Rue's backpack and Marvel's and condenses all of that into her supplies. Unfortunately, now I'm going to talk about Gale. Katniss briefly thinks of Gale a couple times in this set of chapters. After she wakes up from the Tracker Jacker venom, Katniss eats a little bit from a honeysuckle bush. The taste of that reminds her of summer and my home in the woods and Gale's presence beside me. And then she thinks, for some reason, our discussion from that last morning comes back to me. We could do it, What? Leave the district, run off, live in the woods. You and I, we can make it. And suddenly, I'm not thinking of Gale, but of Peeta, and Peeta, he saved my life, I think. I just think it's funny. She's like, yeah, I'm remembering this moment with Gale. Also, Peeta, oh my god! And then when she thinks of Gale and then immediately switches to Peeta, she pushes it from her mind because she says, I wonder what Gale made of the incident for a moment, and then I push the whole thing out of my mind because for some reason, Gale and Peeta do not coexist well together in my thoughts. There's a couple reasons why that is. Gale's personality is one of them. I will touch on this more in Mockingjay. There's the symbolism with Peeta being peace and Gale being war, and peace and war not coexisting well together in her mind. Like I mentioned earlier, after Rue's death, Katniss understands Gale's ranting in the woods. Like, she's always hated the Capitol, but she just didn't really see the point of, screaming about it in the woods. But the anger that she feels, the rage at the Capitol, she gets it now. Back to what I touched on in episode 1 is the difference between how Katniss and Gale view killing. We start to see the difference of their mindsets here, because Gale was telling her it's no different than hunting. And Katniss was like, they're people though. And here she's realizing how right she was. She says, I hear Gale saying, how different can it be, really? Amazingly similar in the execution, a bow pulled, an arrow shot, entirely different in the aftermath. I killed a boy whose name I don't even know. Somewhere his family's weeping for him. His friends call for my blood. Maybe he had a girlfriend who really believed he would come back. But then I think of Rue's still body and I'm able to banish the boy from my mind. At least for now. Katniss can realize that the Capitol is at fault for their situation, but she can also be angry at Marvel for being the one to kill Rue. Killing Marvel stays with Katniss after her games, of course. The lullaby that Katniss sings to Rue as she dies. There's some foreshadowing with it. She says, the song that comes to mind is a simple lullaby, one we sing fretful, hungry babies to sleep with. It's old, very old, I think, made up long ago in our hills. What my music teacher calls a mountain air, but the words are easy and soothing, promising tomorrow will be more hopeful than this awful piece of time we call today. Katniss will sing this lullaby to her children years and years and years after the wars ended, so it does promise a more hopeful tomorrow. It's just not actually tomorrow. It's years down the line and after a lot of loss. Lucy Gray also sings this lullaby to Maude Ivory, which I will talk about in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Onto the spark of the revolution. This set of chapters really starts to ignite the flames of Katniss's role in the revolution and the start of the rebellion. Rue's death is when she realizes what PETA means about being a piece in their games. And she recognizes here that while Marvel did kill Rue and she hates him for it, she hates the Capitol more. She can recognize that Marvel was also a child and the Capitol is at fault for putting them in this arena. She says, I can't bring myself to leave her like this. Past harm, but seemingly utterly defenseless. To hate the boy from District 1, who also appears vulnerable in death, seems inadequate. It's the Capitol I hate for doing this to all of us. And Katniss says that her and Rue are more than just a piece in their games, and she wants to show the Capitol that. I want to throw in this parallel with Sunrise on the Reaping. After Luella's death, Maisie says she doesn't belong to them. Don't just hand her over. Make them fight for her. Run. District 11 sending the bread to Katniss, a tribute who is not from their own district, is a first. And it's just laying the seeds for what's to come of the districts uniting to fight against the Capitol. There's this moment, too, that is one, Katniss not underestimating herself, and it foreshadows her role in the rebellion later on. I think I really stand a chance of doing it now. Winning. It's not just having the arrows or outsmarting the careers a few times, although those things help. Something happened when I was holding Rue's hand, watching the life drain out of her. Now I am determined to avenge her, to make her loss unforgettable, and I can only do that by winning and thereby making myself unforgettable, which she does. More on the Tracker Jacker Venom side of foreshadowing and parallels and all that. This quote reminded me of Finnick's quote in Mockingjay. Katniss says, I enter a nightmare from which I wake repeatedly, only to find a greater terror awaiting me. She's talking about, like, going through nightmare after nightmare after nightmare, but it made me think of what Finnick says on Mockingjay. I drag myself out of nightmares each morning and find there's no relief in waking. Better not to give into it. It takes 10 times as long to put yourself back together as it does to fall apart. I have to stop myself from quoting the movie version of that line.
I drag myself out of nightmares and there's no relief in waking up. But it's better not to give into it. It takes 10 times longer to put yourself back together than it does to fall apart.
The nightmares that Katniss suffers during the Tracker Jacker Venom alludes to stuff that happens later in the series. She says, how many ways do I watch Prim die, relive my father's last moments, feel my own body ripped apart? Katniss will watch Prim die in Mockingjay, and Prim dies the same way as her father by an explosion. In this book alone, Cato is ripped apart by Mutts at the end of the games. And then in Mockingjay, Finnick, Holmes, and Castor are all decapitated by the lizard mutts during the siege on the Capitol. Some moments I want to talk about right now with PETA's hijacking is Katniss says that this is the nature of the Tracker Jacker Venom, so carefully created to target the place where fear lives in your brain. When Katniss thinks back to this moment in Mockingjay when they're explaining PETA's hijacking, she says, terror, hallucinations, nightmarish visions of losing those I love, because the venom targets the part of the brain that houses fear. I will touch much more on this in Mockingjay, but Katniss says, but just the fact that he was sparkling leads me to doubt everything that happened. So Katniss is doubting that Peeta saved her because he was sparkling. Well, Peeta says in Mockingjay that the Tracker Jacker venom false memories have like a shiny quality to them, which comes from this part of the Tracker Jacker venom that Katniss also experienced. I will talk much more about that in Mockingjay though. Katniss teaming up with Rue in the 74th, and Rue being, you know, the quote-unquote, like, weak tribute. In Catching Fire, Katniss also wants to ally up with the weak tributes, and I'm saying that in, like, quotations. She wants Wyrus, Beetee, and Mags in the Quarter Quell. One, because she wants to protect them, and two, because she can see the skills that these tributes possess. Because Rue is a survivor, she knows how to survive on the land. She does help Katniss during the games. It's not just about brute strength. Katniss saying that she can almost hear Haymitch groaning when she teams up with Rue. Haymitch knows this firsthand because he teamed up with a 12-year-old in Sunrise on the Reaping, Ampert, which I will talk about more in Sunrise on the Reaping. But speaking of Sunrise on the Reaping real quick, there's a little moment that makes me think of Sunrise on the Reaping and fanning the flames of the rebellion. Katniss says, when she's talking about if she should shoot a flaming arrow into the supplies to try to ignite it, she says, but there's no guarantee it would catch. Most likely, it'd just burn itself out, and then what? I'd have achieved nothing and given them far too much information about myself. So if you look at this just at face value, Katniss is just literally talking about shooting a flaming arrow into the supplies. But I couldn't help but thinking of this as a metaphor for the rebellion and Haymitch's failed attempts at trying to spark it and destroying the arena. Plutarch thought that Haymitch may be the spark that ignites the rebellion. Haymitch did mess up his arena, but it wasn't catastrophic enough and it wasn't shown on TV like Katniss destroying the arena was. And Haymitch ended up losing everything because of his actions, because he revealed too much of himself, because he didn't have the protection, quote unquote protection, of the rebellion. There was no guarantee that Katniss would be the one to spark the uprisings, just like the flaming arrow has no guarantee of actually igniting the pyramid. Speaking of the pyramid, Foxface just takes a handful of things here and there from the career supplies, so that way they don't notice that stuff is gone, but it's just enough to keep her alive. This is very clever, obviously, but this cleverness leads to her death. When Katniss and Peeta are out hunting and foraging, Foxface takes a little bit of cheese from Katniss and Peeta, and she thinks the nightlock berries are safe to eat because Peeta's collecting them and planning to eat them. But what Foxface didn't account for was that Peeta didn't know that these berries were poisonous, so her cleverness is actually what ends up leading to her death. When Katniss shoots the sack of apples at the career supplies to blow everything up, it calls back to Katniss shooting the arrow in her Game Maker session. When she's debating on if she should sever the rope that's holding the bag, she thinks, didn't I do as much in the training center? And this may be another one of Hannah That's Unhinged. I don't know what you're talking about. You're reading too much into this. But she shoots 3 arrows, and there's 3 original books. Quote, the first arrow tears through the side of the bag near the top, leaving a split in the burlap. The first book sets the groundwork for the spark of the rebellion, starting the crack or the tear in the system. The second one widens it into a gaping hole. Catching Fire fans the flames of the rebellion, widening the crack or the tear in the system. I can see the first apple teetering when I let the third arrow go, catching the torn flap of the burlap and ripping it from the bag. The third book, Mockingjay, is when everything detonates and tears the system down. There's some mirroring for Cato's death later on with this set of chapters. After the explosion, Katniss thinks that she has to get out of there because if Cato catches her, he will make her suffer a long and painful death. At the end of the games, Cato suffers a very long, painful death, which Katniss eventually puts an end to by shooting him and ending his suffering. There's also some moments of just the arrogance of the careers. Because of their arrogance, they don't carry a lot of food on them, because why would they? They have a whole bunch of food back at their camp. But that means when Katniss destroys their supplies, they're screwed because they don't have a lot of food on them and they don't know how to survive off the land. When Katniss is going through Marvel's bag, she thinks, a pack of dried fruit, out of all the things he might have chosen from. To me, this is a sign of extreme arrogance. Why bother to carry food when you have such a bounty back at camp? When you can kill your enemy so quickly, you'll be home before you're hungry. This is kind of a moment of world building, but I wanted to add it in here because it does call back to something last episode. Katniss leaves the spear in Rue's body because weapons that are in or on bodies are removed from the arena along with the corpse. That's why Katniss had to run back to Glimmer's body before the hovercraft arrived, because Glimmer had a death grip on the bow and she had on the quiver of arrows, because if she hadn't got them off of her, they would have been removed from the arena. Now I'm going to talk about 2 different things, but they're both about quotes. So the quote on the back of the first Hunger Games book, at least the hardcover copies, is, once I'm on my feet, I realize escape might not be so simple. Panic begins to set in. I can't stay here. Flight is essential, but I can't let my fear show. That quote comes from this set of chapters. It's not the full excerpt, but it comes from after Katniss blows up the career supplies and she's trying to make it back to the trees. And the last thing I want to talk about with the quote is actually a Taylor Swift reference. Well, actually, Taylor Swift makes a Hunger Games reference, because if you didn't know, Taylor wrote 2 songs for the Hunger Games soundtrack. She wrote Safe and Sound and Eyes Open. And in this set of chapters, there is a sentence that Katniss says, safe and sound. And that's in chapter 16. Every time I see that, I'm like, Taylor. I feel like that was a shorter deep dive section too. But I'm going to now move on to the timeline of the games. This set of chapters starts out with Sunday, July 16th. It's the 6th day in the arena, and Katniss is still passed out from the Tracker Jacker venom. There are no fallen tributes that day. Monday, July 17th is Arena Day 7, so a total of 1 week so far in the arena. Katniss wakes up and allies with Rue, and again, no fallen tributes. Tuesday, July 18th is the 8th day in the arena. Katniss blows up the career supplies, and there are 2 fallen tributes that day. The District 10 boy with a crippled leg and the District 3 boy. On Wednesday, July 19th, it is the 9th day in the arena, and Rue is killed by Marvel, and Katniss kills him. There are 2 fallen tributes that day, and they are Marvel and Rue. Lastly, Thursday, July 20th is Arena Day 10. The rule change that 2 tributes from the same district can win is announced, and there are no fallen tributes. At the end of this set of chapters, there are only 6 tributes remaining. They are from District 2, Cato and Clove, District 5, Foxface, District 11, Thresh, and of course, from District 12, Katniss and Peeta. The total amount of time that has elapsed in the arena is 10 days. For the injuries that Katniss sustains in this set of chapters, she says in chapter 15 that my hip bones and ribs are more prominent than I remember them being since those awful months after my father's death. And then there are my wounds to contend with, burns, cuts, and bruises from smashing into trees, and 3 Tracker Jacker stings, which are as sore and swollen as ever. But Rue does end up giving Katniss leaves, of course, to help with her Tracker Jacker stings. After blowing up the career supplies, Katniss can't hear anything for a while out of either ear, but then eventually some ringing starts to come back in her right ear and she can hear again out of that side, but her left ear will remain deaf for the remainder of the games. She's also so dizzy to the point that she can't walk after the explosion, so she probably has a concussion or some other type of brain injury from that. To add on to the supplies that Katniss has, at the end of the sub-chapter, she of course has her bow and she has 9 arrows remaining. She gets from Marvel's pack a first aid kit, a pack of dried fruit, a small leather pouch, and a full bottle of water. And then from Rue's pack, she takes her water skin, nuts and roots, extra socks, and a bit of rabbit. Now on to symbolism. For this episode, I'm going to cover some plants and colors that are mentioned. The honeysuckle bush can represent happiness, affection, and love. Wildflowers can represent resilience, beauty, and freedom. Daisies, which, fun fact, are my favorite flower, can represent purity, innocence, loyalty, and love. They can also symbolize other things, and depending on the color, those can represent specific things. But I think with what's happening in this set of chapters when daisies are mentioned, those 4 things work the best for symbolizing because like they can represent joy, and I don't think anyone is feeling joy in this set of chapters in this moment. The color violet represents nobility, power, wisdom, and ambition. Yellow, which I can't remember if I covered yellow or if I was saving that for the dandelion, but if I already mentioned it, here's what yellow means again. It means joy, optimism, sunshine, and hope. The color white represents purity, innocence, and new beginnings, but it can also symbolize coldness and emptiness. Silver, which is the color of the parachutes and the color of Katniss's weapons, represents sophistication, wealth, success, innovation, and strength. Just a few quotes from this set of chapters that I like, or they represent stuff in the series that I haven't mentioned already, because I feel like I did a lot of quotes this episode and I've already mentioned them, but there's 3 right here that there's 3 right here that I want to talk about. Katniss says, destroying things is much easier than making them. And then the next quote is when Cato says, when we find her, I'll kill her in my own way and no one interferes. And then Katniss says, somehow I don't think he's talking about Rue. She didn't drop a nest of Tracker Jackers on him. And lastly, but I can't let my fear show. Absolutely, positively, I am live on every screen in Panem. To wrap up the episode, I'm going to cover some changes that the movie made from the book. Rue talking about her life in District 11 is gone in the movie. Also, Rue saying that she's never had a full leg of grueling to herself before is gone. In the movie, Katniss wakes up with leaves wrapped around her stings. In the book, after Katniss hunts after waking up, that's when she notices Rue and the 2 team up. Rue then helps her with the stings by chewing up medicinal leaves and putting the glob on her stings, and Katniss gives Rue some of her burn medicine. Katniss and Rue's conversation that night is just gone. Also, like Rue's token, which I talked about more last episode. In the movie, the boy from District 3 stays behind at the supplies and then just wanders off. But in the book, he just goes with the careers to start out with. Katniss's hearing loss and her being deaf in her left ear is gone in the movies. There is a deleted scene in the first Hunger Games movie of them showing her trying to test out her ear, but there's just no mention of her being deaf in her left ear at all. after the explosion, Katniss also isn't able to just get up and run away from the careers. She has to crawl into hiding in the trees and then stay there for the rest of the night. Rue's death scene is slightly different in the movie than it is in the book. In the movie, Katniss tells Prim that you're okay when she's dying, but in the book, Katniss says that, quote, there's no point in comforting words and telling her she'll be all right. She's no fool. In the book, Katniss arrives just as Marvel is spearing Rue, and then after Katniss kills him, she frees Rue from the net. In the movie, Katniss arrives, frees Rue from the net, and then Marvel shows up, throws the spear. Katniss ducks and shoots him, but the spear pierces Rue. Katniss also doesn't take packs from Rue or Marvel like she did in the book. Finally, Katniss gives the District 12 salute to Rue, not to the cameras like she does in the movie. And that is it for this week's episode of District Deep Dive. This episode is shorter, shockingly, than my other ones, but I think it's just because I've already covered a lot of the world building and the characters, so we didn't have to add as many in this. We can just get into the deep dive section a lot quicker. Next week, I will be covering part 3, The Victor, chapters 19 through 23. Before you go, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and turn on notifications so you get notified every time I post a new episode. If you would prefer to listen to this in podcast form, all episodes of District Deep Dive are available wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow me and the show on TikTok and Instagram, which I have all linked below. And with that, I will see you all next week. Bye, guys.